Do, 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 do. Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, a business podcast about revenue-generating partnerships, not a podcast about business time with friends. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
Hey, friends. Welcome back. We are here with the Friends with Benefits podcast. And today I'm so excited because we have one of my personal friends, someone I really look up to in the industry. If you've heard of the Salesforce ecosystem, you've definitely heard of this guy. We're so excited to have Mr. Mike Davis on the podcast today. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Jason. Good to see you guys.
Hello. Good to see you again. Longtime friend of the RB household. First time podcast guest. Love it.
So, Mike, from the beginning, I'm just going to get into it because we don't have a ton of time, but I have a lot that I want to talk to you about today. Sorry to cut you off, Jay. You have pretty much been in some way involved with a partner of Salesforce. If we look at your resume, which it's a good one, you've got Exactly, Conga, TaskRay, go-to-market guides, which recently got acquired by InVisory. So congrats to you. That's huge. Well done.
Thank you.
You're the go-to on Salesforce best practices in the ecosystem for ISVs, how to work with SIs. Like I said, I've certainly geeked out when talking with you and reading through your stuff. I've learned a ton from you. So we're so excited to have you here. We like to start the podcast with kind of an odd question. Jason, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So we're trying to kick it off right now to get better context around what we're doing on this podcast, but not really. The question at hand is, what does Friends with Benefits in the context of business partnerships mean to you, Mike Davis?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, when I think about partnerships, it starts with the benefits part, and ideally it moves into the friends part. Like, it's obviously awesome when you can actually start to work with a buddy. That's amazing if they're friends first and then you get to work with them. But I think from a partnerships point of view, starting with the end, it's hey, we have to benefit each other. Let's call a spade, and then let's develop a friendship and genuinely like each other. But we're trying to both make money here. So from a partnership point of view, let's make sure that makes sense first.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. Great answer. Do you have any relevant experiences early in your career that can kind of glean on that?
From a benefits for, every partnership, and then I started hanging out with people that I've worked with before. I've vacationed with people that I've worked with before. I think that's the best part of it.
That's when you peaked and made it.
Yeah, that's the Friends with Benefits part.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we were kind of chatting about that with one of our friends in the second podcast, Elliot, and some of the travels I've done with him and getting those invites. That's when you feel like you've kind of made it into the family.
Totally.
So let's take a step back in Mike Davis's career. You mentioned you former soccer player. So you were, I think if we read correctly, if we did our research and due diligence, you were a men's soccer team co-captain in college. Tell us where you played and what position, and if that matters to some of the listeners. But also, more importantly, how do you think those experiences impacted how you approach business and partnerships today? How does that experience come into what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I played at a state school in upstate New York called SUNY Oswego, and I played all growing up and from an early age, and couldn't get enough of playing soccer. And then, earned the co-captain spot with Pat Hurley. Shout out to Pat, senior year. And I bounced around a little bit. I came in as a number 9, a forward, and then moved to the wing a bit. and then really settled in junior and senior year to like a number 6 role. So like a holding center midfielder. Because I used to be able to run like crazy. I don't run much anymore, but I used to be like in high school. I had a sub 5-minute mile. Like I could really crank it. But anyway, but enough about that. How it relates.
I'm impressed.
I know. I'm like surprised too. Now I'd be lucky to like run 1 mile in under 10 minutes versus 2. But
Well, sounds like next time we're together, we should go for a run because we're at the same pace then.
for sure. But thinking about how that pertains to like business, I think it's more about like just like winning. Like different people talk about like hate to lose, love to win. Like I love to win. Like that's what I like to do, and I think that was a foundation from sport. Like avoiding losing has never really motivated me. It's like that thrill of the win, and then obviously soccer's a team sport, so like you can't do it alone. Literally, like you need everybody pulling in the right direction, and people are going to have off days, people are going to have on days, and same thing in the business world. Like same, yeah.
I Interesting. If I recall, I've never really played organized soccer, but I know enough. Big Hotspurs fan, Ted Lasso fan. I played a lot of pickup in high school. Midfielders, you're kind of controlling the pace of the game, right? And you're kind of that partnership person on the field. Is that you're facilitating the moves on the field and what the forwards and the strikers are doing, what the defenders are doing, and working in conjunction with everybody in between. So you're kind of that person who's facilitating the game, much like a partnership person would facilitate a lot of motions between sales, CS, product, and marketing. Am I doing this justice?
Yeah, I dig that. Yeah, because like you're kind of filling in for what the team needs on attack. If your right back is going forward, it's the defensive center midfielder's job to fill in for him. If the ball comes across, like because of your position on the field, you aren't necessarily shooting. You're taking it from one side, throwing it to the other. So yeah, I think that's super fair.
Love that. Love when a good sports analogy comes into play.
Okay, so I was looking through your resume, and one thing that was really interesting that stood out to me was your role at Conga. So you were the director of enterprise sales. But then if you kind of look at what you did there, you were responsible for quote unquote named key accounts, figuring out sales play to align with Salesforce AEs, SEs, CSMs, SIs, and then cross-sell and upsell as the company grew. This is a very, very partner-aligned description for a director of sales. Did you know this is what you were getting into? Did you influence that, or tell us about that?
Yeah, it was organic. Like got hired on a buddy of mine, Bobby Edmundowitz, left Exactly, went to Conga. And then it was right when Insight Partners invested in Conga, and they kind of took this like bootstrapped, like small company, kind of great culture, but playing small, and started to grow it. And so they were hiring enterprise sales. And so me and another guy, JP Leggett, like we're really the first like peers there, and we were tasked to figure it out with another guy, Steve Woodworth, like what's gonna work. And funny side note there, but our SC I actually played against in college, Gary Stom. He put 2
That's
goals
awesome.
in against us, but small world. But
Still
no,
holding on to that one.
yeah.
Mike holds a grudge.
No, yeah, Mike holds a grudge. No big deal. I love Gary. But that was unknown to me. I was coming from Exactly, where it was like we would partner a little bit with Salesforce, but not really. And moving over to Conga, like they were selling a bunch of small deals, like little like 10,000 ARR deals, but they had this customer list, which was incredible. Like probably a third of the Fortune 500 was using Conga, but in this like little group. And so getting in there, figuring it out with JP, like we were figuring out like the AEs and the SEs and the SIs were really key to like listen for doc gen needs and then help us like get much wider in the organization. And so did not expect that, did not know that going in. But a good anecdote I'll share from the SI point of view. It actually taught me a lot that I think about today, from a like what's in it for me for the person I'm trying to partner with. Susie Wallingford, who was responsible for SIs at the time, she got me a sit down with the Accenture global account manager for like a top 5 hotel chain. And I was all jacked up. I was super stoked because we had already had a footprint there. So I'm like, all right, we're going to go wall-to-wall Congo with this guy. It's going to be awesome. I forget the numbers, but like his number at IHG for the year was something like, I don't know, 100 million, 200 million. It was laughable. And like a wall-to-wall Congo implementation would be a couple $100K. And it's like, it taught me there. It's like, these GSIs aren't going to care about that. Like, I got nothing to offer this guy.
Yeah. So how did you begin to establish those relationships to get to the point where they would care? Because like I've managed relationships and I've been, inside of Salesforce and had a product of that same nature. It's like, well, this isn't going to make a difference whatsoever. So like, how does that relationship mature to the point where they do begin to care?
I think that it just what you just said is the most important first step, second step, maybe even third step in the five-step process of partnering with Salesforce in that scenario. Like understanding that it doesn't have a significant financial impact on them directly, I think is an important realization. And so once you like empathize with that position and understand that you're not going to help them hit their number directly from the sale of your product, that's the foundation of like, okay, well, what is our better together story and what does that person care about? And it's going to be a little bit different based on the product, based on the industry, based on the use case. But yeah, I think that's the foundation.
I love that because, I mean, Mike, you and I have talked about this actually. Like my ACV that I can offer to Salesforce, depending on, as you just said, the business segment and the industry, sometimes is like laughable to the Salesforce AE. Although I know that the value it can bring to the customer is really large. And so it's digging in beyond that. And I think, yeah, initially sometimes that dollar amount is really enticing to the Salesforce AE and that can pique their interest. But before, or if that's not true, there has to be a foundation of a relationship there and building that value. Because without it, there are 5,000 partners in the ecosystem. They're not going to pay attention to you. Like,
and can you imagine, like, just talking about Salesforce, but like same thing with Microsoft, same thing with AWS, same thing with any sort of ecosystem. Absolutely. How many low quality outreach they get from ISVs every week. Like, I don't know if you guys could ever, I want to try to get like, talk to an AE and an SE and have like a real conversation about it. Like, tell me the good outreach. Like, you don't have to name names, but like, what does good look like? What does bad look like? Like, give the real point of view, because I'm sure they get a bunch of trash.
That'd be an interesting poll, like, what gets your attention kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I do think it's different for everybody too. And like we said, their business segment. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but Mike, you and I have talked about this also. As an ISV, verticalizing can help with that. And knowing your message and being more targeted. And then you start to like find those pockets of influence. And the network grows for you organically within the ecosystem. But if you just go to the Salesforce ecosystem, which this was my strategy when I started, and I'm here to say, don't do it. I'm like, hey, I'm a partner. Pay attention to me. It just doesn't land.
Well, and I talk about like, I mean, the 10,000 or whatever Salesforce AEs, but pick your company. They're just like us. They're humans like us. Like, they have good days, they have bad days. Some are more partner friendly, some are others. Like, I put them on a bell curve, and like one standard deviation, like way out. I forget percentages. I don't remember statistics very well, but one end of the bell curve, like regardless of your approach, regardless of how much you pay them, they're never going to respond to you, period, full stop. And then the other group, which you probably encountered in your anecdote, Sam, early on, was like, there's a group that will respond to whatever because they're like just helpful, good humans, and like you don't have to add value and they're okay with it. What we have to solve for is that middle, like the middle 80 or whatever percent of that bell curve. It's like, how do we articulate our benefit when it's not just about the money we can pay them? Like, what's that better together story? What's the industry story? How do we make it hyper relevant to that individual and that individual's customer? That's where the magic happens.
Amen.
So I just wrote this down, and it may be the code to cracking Salesforce partnerships, but not really. It's not
I was
at all.
going to say, I'm anxious to hear.
So in the context of relationships, like your vertical becomes your community, and that's where you focus on establishing those relationships. So the code is your vertical is your community. So in the context of Salesforce, Mike or Sam, both of you, like, it sounds like you do believe that relationships and the narrative behind your Better Together story can actually make a difference, even when you have a product that may not make a difference whatsoever in their comp.
No, I agree with that, and it's because like ideally it's financially motivational to them, like directly. But if it's not, there's probably an indirect financial motivation around the Better Together story where it will enable future sales or enable better adoption or enable them to box out a competitor. There's got to be like some sort of WIFM. And without going down that industry approach and getting hyper focused, like you can't craft like a relevant message when it's generic. And so you got to do that work to make it really relevant for each community, as Jason, you were mentioning.
And the other thing I'll tag on to that really quickly is one thing I've learned is going in as a horizontal partner is like, well, here's our price. And that's not always relevant for each industry. So I think that comes back to, as a partner leader, having those internal relationships with your head of sales, with your product team, so that you can come and be like, okay, so for healthcare, for example, these are the average deal size Salesforce is seeing. This is the value our product brings to the table. Can we meet, or can we leverage a different price, a different value to add value to the partnership, but also to the customer? And I think it shouldn't be a one size fits all, is what I'm saying.
Agree.
So I do want to ask, as we're kind of going down this tangent, I mean, I felt this way when I started in the ecosystem, and we've kind of gone around it here, but as we've said, there's 5,000 Salesforce partners, there's 10,000 plus employees. Our goal as partner people is to build relationships. So for somebody who's new to the ecosystem, where do you start? Like, how do you even like get that first relationship to build the next? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I always tell people to go backwards, to go forward. So there's so much good recycling that you can do with like your past customers. Like old case studies that you created 2 years ago, like dust those off and share them like they're brand new. So like that's an example of recycling. Another example of recycling, to answer your question, is like, hey, we've already closed these 100 customers, 20 of which are in financial services. Like, let's go and ask our PAM, our partner account manager, or PDM, depending on your ecosystem. Let's ask who the rep is. And let's educate that rep about the work that we're already doing in an existing account. And if we can start to map our past history to the individuals at Salesforce or whatever partnership, and identify like where we're already at, where we already have natural alignment, like that's the place to start. The other place to start, show up to a World Tour event, show up to Dreamforce. And a fun fact is Salesforce has a booth for all of their industry solutions as well as all of their products. The majority of those are staffed by sales engineers who cover that vertical or that product. And so if you just go up to them and like ask them and start to talk to them about their product, like you can obviously make a connection there too.
Okay, so I have to quick plug here. Mike told me that at World Tour last time, and I was like, what? And I went to the financial services booth, and I was like, they're talking omni-channel. And I was like, what about direct mail? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, I can solve that for you. I got 3 RVP meetings out of it. So it works.
It works. Well, did you start with the SE? Was it the SE there, or was the RVP actually there?
No, the SE was there, and I was like, I think I can add a lot of value to your team. Would you mind sending an intro to your leader? And they're like, absolutely. So they did, and then I just started asking. And I think that's the other thing. It's just like, don't be afraid to ask. You're going to get shut down, but sometimes you won't.
Yeah, I always tell people to go. That's awesome. I didn't know that, Sam. I always tell people to go into conversations with 2 different asks. Like one is like a normal ask, like, hey, run of the mill, like, hey, like make an intro or tell me who I should be talking to at procurement, or like, hey, does this person have the juice? Like that's a quote unquote normal ask for a partner interaction. And then have a swing for the fences ask. Like have like, if you're really vibing with somebody, like give it some thought, like before you're getting on the meeting, like if you could have anything and this person was down to help you with anything, like what would you ask for? And like swing for the fences.
I feel like that's kind of like another trick to Salesforce is like making the ask. Most people are too afraid to make the ask. And in my experience, 7 times out of 10, maybe they'll say, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's see what we can do to make that happen. But I do have kind of a selfish question that I want to tack on to this topic real quick. So, Mike Davis, you get dropped into a Series A startup that's not getting any attention, that doesn't even want really attention from Salesforce. Where are you going to start in building your partnership with Salesforce? And you're at a company that hasn't had a partnership, hasn't built a partnership, doesn't even have a partner manager, onboarding manager, or anything. Where are you going to start?
Well, assuming that they're already signed up as an official partner and they've worked with the ISB onboarding team run by awesome lady over at Salesforce, then like once you're already done your paperwork, like you got to do the work. You got to show up. You got to do the work. These partner account managers on the other side of the world have too many accounts and too many partners coming with their hands out that aren't doing the work. And so, like, how can you be different? You can be different by, like, when you make a request for an introduction to XYZ account, you can make that request with a ghost written email. You can, and again, I would go backwards again. Like, if I'm Series A startup, no relationship with Salesforce, I would look at my customer base. There's probably someone or multiple companies that have like just grabbed your app and connected it with Salesforce themselves because they saw the value of integrating the 2 solutions together. So I would lean on them, and then I would figure out who their account executive is, who their sales engineer is, and get them to be an advocate, and then start to grow from there. So many people get overwhelmed by like, hey, there's 10,000 AEs, there's 2,300 SIs. Like, how am I going to attack all of this? And it's like, well, pick one. We were talking about Ted Lasso. Like, my wife laughs at me because every time, like, I skip most, like, the intro songs, I never skip the Ted Lasso one, and I always start popping during it.
Same.
And the one thing I love, like next time you watch it, it's very much like a partnership done well because the seats are all blue and they're changing color to red. And it's like Ted infecting like this whole community.
Mm-hmm.
Ted Lasso analogies.
Man, we could have a whole podcast on just that.
Yeah, maybe we should change the topic of the podcast of that. I could talk about it all day long. Last piece on that, you said it twice now. So talking to the AE and the SE, is that kind of the secret sauce? And when you're working accounts, is to get both of them together on the hook and kind of establish a relationship that way between AE and SE?
Yeah, AE is better once you're in the account. So if you're working a deal and then you're looking to engage your marketplace counterpart, the AE is going to be a better person to approach, because they're going to know who's who you're not talking to, how procurement is, what else is going on in the account. They're going to give you a lay of the land to reduce the risk of your deal. But from a breaking into new accounts perspective, AEs they turn over faster, they change territories faster, and they have fewer accounts from a reach perspective, because I don't know what the model is. It probably changes like based on it does change based on size of company, but like in the SMB world, one AE might have 20 customer accounts that's in their patch.
Mm-hmm.
But they support 4 or 5 AEs. And so if you can touch one SE, you can get to 80 accounts instead of one AE to 20 accounts. So it's just kind of a math thing.
Mm.
Plus the AE or the SE is in there doing that detailed discovery. They're hearing at a detailed level like what the customer needs, and they understand at a more complex level like what their platform and products can and can't do.
Yeah, I'll say that was a late learning for me, but it has changed the game, just as Mike said. It's like, and then also they're the ones demoing, as he just mentioned. So if you can get in there and they're demoing your product, then like that's scale. Like that's how you make a move.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about TaskRay for a second. So you were VP of sales there. I'm very interested and now you're CRO. So you have a very sales background, but like when somebody thinks Mike Davis, they think partnerships. So I love that. TaskRay is like held up on the gold standard of how to run a Salesforce partner program, and you had your fingerprints all over that. So what did that look like when you picked it up? Did you already have this alignment? Can you talk about that journey a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I walked into a great situation and a great team that was already like executing almost by mistake. And I think Blakely Graham, one of the founders, and Eric Wu and Mike Tetlow, but specifically Blakely, like she would admit that she kind of stumbled into it, but like they just had such a brand promise from an early day that they were going to be Salesforce partners. I've never asked them why they did it, but they always like raised their hand to be like lightning launch partners at Salesforce, and that one was good. Other Dreamforces, they did development as a bootstrap startup that was busy with other stuff. They did development on an Apple Watch integration. Less good. But like what like being a good partner and saying yes to these various opportunities, it just gave it made the brand bigger than it was. And this was all before I got there. And then like we just kind of continued that ethos on, and then just started to be more intentional about it. We started to measure pipeline around it. And we started to realize like hey, this is actually a significant portion of our deal. So then we would do stuff like roll out Test Drive and then make suggestions to the App Exchange team. They would then roll those out into offerings for everybody. And we would roll out SDO integration. And Rob Boyd there, he's at Kicksaw now, like one of the most brilliant minds in the Salesforce ecosystem. Like he crafted like our SDO approach, and we just kind of did that on the side. So I don't know why it was. I don't know like what we were doing, but we would just like kind of be a good partner, I guess, and sometimes to our detriment.
There's so much to unpack there, though. Like, I mean, I'm sitting in my seat now, and we try to say yes to as much as we possibly can, but it's become very clear to me that if you don't have alignment across your company, a partnership with Salesforce is never going to reach its full potential. So like a lot of the things you just talked about there eventually will lead to more revenue in ACV, but they come from product and aligning roadmap and go-to-market alignment. And so for somebody who is tasked with building a partnership with Salesforce, and it's like, well, build revenue to show the value before you get any internal resources. Can you, like, how would you approach that? Because that's a very real problem that a lot of people are facing, sometimes myself included.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. Like, I walked into a great situation. They took a chance on me early, and we made it work together, and it was great. But like for a lot of folks coming into it, you have to show success first. I mean, not to pitch our own stuff, but you can build this in Salesforce anyway. But like, it's starting to track. Like, a problem that we're solving with a product called Partner Success Tracker is like marketing every webinar that they run, every event that they run, every LinkedIn ad that they run. They know exactly what it costs, how many leads they got, how many opportunities, how much closed business. Attribution is laser focused, and it has been for over a decade for the marketing org. And then partnership, we're hanging out on feelings. Like, I feel like our average deal size is bigger. I feel like it closes faster. I feel like it'll help us in the future if we do this stuff. Can I swear on the podcast?
Yeah.
You may.
I always say, like, my wife's a therapist. So, like, your feelings are valid, but fuck your feelings. Like, like you can feel the way you do and your feelings are valid, but also fuck your feelings. And in this regard, like if a CFO is sitting in times like this and looking to make a cut somewhere, like, are they going to cut the LinkedIn budget that we know if we put 500K in, we get out 800K? No. He or she is going to cut the alliances team because we're hanging out in feelings land.
Yeah, so it's so important to have your program backed by data and ready to present the data at any given point in time.
Yeah, I mean, Reveal's another good example. I don't have to just plug my wares here, but Reveal's another good example of being able to take a data-based approach to partnering.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to, like Sam usually preaches all the time, like how do you incorporate your partner data into what your sales team, revenue team, finance team is doing and looking at? Like, that's the only way to get that full buy-in, full access across the board, is when you begin to just basically, and get all of your partner data ingested into the field team's activities. So, back to TaskRate for just a second, interaction with Salesforce. As that became more of a prominent partnership, how often were you, the VP of Sales, interacting with Salesforce and the partner team?
Yeah, so I mean, I was having every other week meetings with our partner account manager. Like, somebody else on the team took lead in those from like a tactical standpoint, but I was like a quote unquote exec sponsor for that program.
Cool.
And so I was showing up and contributing. And then, like, depending on the size of the audience that we got, we really focused, like, for reasons we discussed, on enabling sales engineers. And so if it was a large team, I would join those. And if it was a smaller team, our alliances manager, Will Golf, he would roll those himself. But yeah, I mean, I was super involved in that stuff. And obviously, like, I didn't know it at the time, but like, I kind of loved it. And then started a business around it. So, I think I like found it and then really glommed onto it because I enjoyed it so much.
Well, that's
Love
a
it.
perfect segue, because that's where I wanted to go next. After TaskRate, you clearly took a big leap, started go-to-market guides. What was going through your head? How was that journey? And I mean, you said you loved it enough to take a risk and start a business on it. Can you talk about that?
Well, I was so fortunate. It was actually no risk for me because how this played out was like during the pandemic, TaskRay, we had to make some layoffs. And so I was kind of like, I was thinking about it, and I wasn't even thinking of starting the business at the time, but talked to Blakely and was like, hey, maybe I go down to 4 days a week for a little bit of time here and take a pay cut, and we can like keep another person on board. And it was the summer, and my wife works in the school system, so I was like expecting to hang out with her every Friday. But then it turns out I couldn't sit still, and so I started this, and like luckily like Blakely and Eric like gave me the green light to do it in public and not have to hide it. And so what was cool was I was doing TaskRay 4 days a week, GTM guides 1 day a week, and just figuring it out. And I was surprised when somebody asked me to do advisory for them around their partner program. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And they actually didn't move forward. I ended up working with their competitor as like my second customer. So that's kind of fun too. But I started talking to people because I don't know, I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. It wasn't in my plan. It wasn't in my goals. I didn't even know I could do it. I didn't know I had permission to do it. And so I just started to talk to people about the idea, and I had assumed other companies were doing it. I had assumed Code Science as a PDO was doing what I was doing. And then after I had 20 different conversations with friendlies, I realized nobody was doing it, and kind of found a niche. I'm big into brand. I'm big into niche. I'm big into thought leadership as a way to drive business value. And so I was super fortunate because I was able to start this 1 day a week, and then by the time TaskRay sold, it had grown to a really significant amount of revenue. And so I was able to leave TaskRay, focus on it full time, risk free. It was amazing.
That's the dream.
Anybody looking to do a side hustle, do it. Start. You don't, and too many people think it's binary. You have to quit in order to start. You don't. You can do both. You're just busy.
Absolutely.
You're just
Great
busy.
point. And bringing it full circle to the podcast theme title, launching go-to-market guides, how important were the relationships that you had established within Salesforce to getting go-to-market guides launched or GTM guides launched, and being able to take it full time?
So important. Because TaskRay, even though we were small, had a good brand. I don't think I was super well known personally. Now I'm I call it I'm Salesforce famous for Salesforce ISVs.
It's true.
Love it.
But
Very niche fame. Very niche fame.
Very super niche fame. But there were some folks that were so impactful that I don't know, so many people helped because and those were folks that I did meet, Jason, to your point, during my prior partnership conversations.
So it's interesting. So it's how you leverage some prior relationships, but you also were able to some extent leverage the relationship of the brand TaskRay.
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot that people don't take into consideration when you go somewhere. In the last couple of jobs I've moved to, one of the parts I've looked at is who has a really good brand presence in the market, because that brand relationship with the partnerships you're establishing make a difference. And in your case, it made the difference in being able to leverage that relationship the brand had to build an entire company.
Yeah, I stumbled into a lot of this stuff. My internship turned into a full-time job during college with a company called Centtive that was acquired by Exactly. Exactly was totally random. Nothing I did for it. Sure, I sold some software to help them IPO, but it wasn't me IPO'd them.
Right.
But Exactly is a good brand. Same thing with Conga, 14 to 40 million. That wasn't me. you sure, like I closed a mill or a mill and a half, like a year, but like that wasn't all me. But like to your point, it creates that kind of like brand image of like, okay, choosing good company is reflects positively on you.
Well, and I also think give yourself some credit there, because I'm going to assume, just from what I know of you, you showed up, you were curious, and you were always helping people. And I think that's something that makes better relationships, but it also can improve your career immensely. And, you know, this could have been very opposite for you. And I'm sure there were people in your path that it did go opposite because they weren't helping people and being curious and showing up. So,
No doubt.
Absolutely, and the relationships matter, and like the ability to provide that value and help matter. And we'll bring this thing in for a landing here in just a second. But to tack onto that is, we saw you have a philosophy, and I think it might be your newest ebook. I think you're always putting out some great content, but your newest ebook states that you have a philosophy that sales and marketing, and correct me if I get this wrong, but sales and marketing, they should be helping people do their jobs a little bit better, even for $0. And if you do that well, even for $0, they'll eventually pay you, right? And the value there is that, you know, you're helping, you're providing, you're becoming a resource, and then as a result, reciprocity will follow. So, like, is this something you learn throughout your time, or is this just like who you are innately? How can this be better practice across the board?
Yeah, I it definitely wasn't like intentional. Like, I mean, now my state school, SUNY Oswego, does have a sales minor program, which is cool. But like most colleges don't teach sales. They definitely don't teach partnerships, and definitely don't teach like modern sales if they do teach sales. But so this philosophy, I mean, Challenger Sale talks a lot about like commercial teaching, commercial learning, and I think this is a variant of this. I just like to speak more plainly. Like if you help people do their jobs better, period. Like trust builds, and if you become their go-to resource when they have a question or two, and they search Google and they find your stuff because your SEO is good. Or they're part of a community, and they see you, and like eventually when they're in a meeting and somebody says, hey, we need to improve how we partner with Salesforce SIs this year, somebody in that room who you've helped is going to say, oh yeah, let's call InVisory, because they helped me do my job some other time. And you brought in the rule of reciprocity. Like I always talk about that. John Barris has some good content around that. John Barris is a prominent sales trainer. I always think about it like if you're walking into a building with double doors, like with two different door sets, like if somebody's walking in front of you and holds the door for you to walk through first, like you have to be an absolute sociopath to like that next person to open the door and walk through first. Like no normal person is going to do that. They're going to like respond in kind and open that door for you.
Exactly. As a Southern gentleman, I can appreciate that.
Where are you from in the South? I didn't know you were Southern.
North Carolina.
Nice.
Sam and I met in Charlotte. I grew up in Greensboro. We moved out to Montana about 6-7 years ago.
yeah, a lifetime ago.
Living that Yellowstone life.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take him to the train station, you know.
Okay, so for those of you who are just listening, earlier in the podcast, Mike pointed above his door. Mike, what's above your door?
Oh, belief sign from Ted Lasso.
Okay.
I love it.
So for all of those avid listeners, hi, Mom. You know we like to close the podcast with a little bit of a out of the normal question. So in the theme of Ted Lasso, Mike, who would be a better chief ecosystem officer? Rebecca, Roy, or Ted?
Not Ted. Definitely not Ted. Too nice. Too nice. Like that, he would have been the best chief ecosystem officer a decade and a half ago, when it was shaking hands, kissing babies, golf course stuff. It's got to be Rebecca.
Preach.
Interesting.
Lady power.
What is it now versus a decade ago that makes Rebecca better than Ted?
It's the recognition, bringing it back to the start, the friends with benefits. It's got to start with the benefit. I don't care if I like you or not. Like, I'm not going to do business with you because I like you. I'm going to do business with you because you help my business or you help my customers, like, full stop. And so, like, when I think about Ted, like, he'd be helping everybody to even his detriment and hanging out and golfing. He'd always take you to golf. He'd always pay. But
Yep.
like, Rebecca's going to expect that it's mutually beneficial because she doesn't have time for that.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. I thoroughly enjoy our conversation. So thanks so much for joining us.
Yes.
For those of you that want to learn more, check out InVisory. They're doing really, really great work in the ecosystem. Mike and team are definitely people to follow if you're new or you're experienced in the ecosystem. There's definitely stuff to learn. So thank you. You're a true friend. Looking forward to next time. And we'll see you all soon.
Awesome.
Thanks,
y'all.
Mike. See you, friends.
See ya.
Do, 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 do.